that the governor issued. That emergency order basically says that we're still all under the COVID-19 emergency order. Under the condominium emergency powers, and there could be debate about the applicability of this, and I mentioned that several times on the air. But basically, under those emergency powers, the board can determine, for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, whether certain portions of the community are off limits to owners, tenants, guests, things like that. Again, for the protection of health, safety, welfare. So, I know some communities are still keeping their clubhouses closed, keeping their interior community rooms closed. Others maybe allowing them open with masks and things like that. I think at a minimum, it's only with CDC guidelines in place as far as distancing and wearing masks. I don't know if, the vaccinations, obviously that's a good step. Not everyone's been vaccinated. The science on that is still very, very new. It seems that the vaccination does prevent one either from getting ill or getting severely ill if they get COVID. I don't believe the science is there yet as to whether or not it stops transmission. As far as I know, it does not stop transmission. It just stops one from, getting severely ill. But again, this is all obviously exceedingly new. So I believe that every association can still, because the emergency order is still in effect until the end of the month. This month, I will probably extend it again, most likely. Can determine if it is safe, and that's a hard word to put your finger on, for those areas to be open and to be used. But again, if you have a local emergency order, on top of that, you have to follow that as well.
Barbara, do you? Barbara, I have a couple questions for you. One, do you currently have any kind of policy or restrictions in your association in terms of in terms of access by guests, or in terms of even access by, certain types of uses of facilities, pools, clubhouses? Do you have any rules right now?
We do. We have the rule where the pool is at, the half capacity, and we weren't allowing any guests at the pool, but we've started allowing 2 guests at the pool. But we still can't go over 10 people at the pool. So we have that very restrictive, and that's worked out. We have we only allow up to 2 people in the gym. The community rooms we're not renting any of them out because the county rules are really restrictive, and we can't figure out how you even rent the rooms out. But we didn't put any on the barbecue and the community rooms to have guests over. We didn't put any rules, and nobody had anybody over for the longest time.
Right.
So it was almost like, it just didn't even matter. But now that older people have gotten these vaccines, all of a sudden on Friday, the bridge game started again.
Yeah.
And, they didn't ask permission or anything, but there was nothing that we've put in the rules saying our normal rules is you can have up to 6 guests per resident. So we've got several residents, and they have their guests in, and for years they played bridge. And now it's not like anybody else is in there using the room, but just the fact that they're in there, it's gotten people's attention, and they're like, oh, they can't do that. And it's like, well, we don't have any current rule against it. And the rules for the county say they can play as long as they all have masks, or if they're all in the same family. Our community rules are you have to have a mask anywhere inside the facilities anyway. So, we haven't addressed it. I'm on the board. I'm going to talk to our property manager, but I'm suspecting he got several complaints on Friday. And so now it's like, do we put another rule in just saying no guests or up to 2 guests or something like that, just to keep the numbers down?
I agree with, I certainly agree with Peter in terms of, I think you've got a lot of flexibility and latitude in terms of what you want to do. I personally think that, it makes some sense to potentially treat guests different than members, in terms of access, and also in terms of procedure. I mean, for example, I think you could have it just like it is any place where, you not only have to wear masks, but maybe there's temperature that has to be taken or something like that that you can do to prevent. I think that you should, and you can certainly have, even though it's not required, you could have mandatory requirements. You could have voluntary requirements that are more stringent than the county, and to encourage people. I mean, I don't notice this stuff as much anymore in Martin County because I'm around a lot, and I automatically have a certain procedure that I do when I go someplace, and especially if it's someplace I don't go on a regular basis. I treat that a little differently. I treat the contact a little differently, but I think it makes sense because it is a community room for members, and you have a lot of people who are probably in your community that feel safe in the community, but don't feel safe going out to a restaurant at 100% capacity, for example, or whatever.
That's exactly right. They'd say, we don't, even though you don't really know your neighbors, what they're doing, they say, we don't know these people. These are new people coming to our community. We don't know them.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
But I think go ahead, Peter.
I've been on the conservative, safer side this whole thing. Okay. And in terms of, I don't have any issue with associations obviously following the local order because you have to, but even being more restrictive. I think, that if you want to limit guests, either prohibit them or limit the number, I'm good with that. I think that obviously you have to have mask wearing. I still think you have to have the CDC guidelines in place as far as social distancing. And I think that if it's going to be open, that you basically do have signs posted, saying that you must be masked, you must social distance, and, use at own risk because, COVID-19 is out there. I would post up signs so people are aware. I'm assuming that the facility, the community room, the clubhouse, whatever, is going to be open. But I have no real issue at this point, with, being still somewhat restrictive. If it's going to be open, enforcing again either no guests or having it limited, because you don't know where.
Well, I think that what you're saying is, that was the concern. You get a large group and they're all sitting at these tables, pretty tight quarters. If you're going to keep the social distancing, you really can't have, maybe you can allow table games for current residents, but that you can't have table games for guests.
I agree.
And
I know in Broward, I think the pool can only be 50% capacity and it has to be spread, and that's outside. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So inside obviously is, more risky, and, vaccination, no vaccination. I still think you can't be having people crowded in a room.
I think though, Barbara, that, as people come to this area for the exact reason that they want to see with their friends. Most of these people are here for the season, but these people are like family, everybody's friends and family type thing almost. So I understand. I mean, and these people have been playing bridge together for years. So, when if you just say you can't do it or you can't come in or your friends can't come here anymore, that's really going to irritate a lot of people, because that's why they came here, and that's why they live in your community, is because many of them love that kind of relationship. And but I think you can do some things that are voluntary, and I think you can do some things like, for example, there's sporting events and things like that you can go to, and if you're in a group, they keep that group the same. And you can, and then they kind of make sure that group doesn't change. And then that group can be a little closer together. But so what you may want to do is, encourage that type of thing. In other words, we're going to do this, but we're going to have certain groups that are going to be playing all the time. Now I know that's not as challenging because people like to play against different players and all that kind of thing. But it could be a way to provide some regulation without saying, well, you got to be 6 feet apart, because you're sitting at a card table. You're not 6 feet apart, And
no, they're not. There's one other little wrinkle to this: is the card where they're playing cards is an area that people transit to get to the gym. they don't have to come really close to the people playing cards, but it is inside the same facility.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Now in Broward right now, the community rooms are 50% capacity. And if you have a multiplayer game going on, like a mahjong or a poker, you can play in a community room with people who are not in the same household or not in the same family, but you can if everyone's wearing masks. The rule also says that the community, though, if it deems so, can keep these rooms closed if they feel they cannot operate them safely. So, before, communities.
So that's the discussion we have to have: is can we operate it safely, and are they going to abide by the rules?
Yeah.
And is the rest of the community not going to, obviously the owners, if they really are upset by it, they'll have, a big say in it.
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously you've got the, we believe that you have the authority as a board to take action. We believe that's true because of the emergency order that's still in effect. I would just caution, Broward's in a much more restricted area than we are up here. Their numbers have been a lot worse than we've had up here. And of course it's an area where, the people up here are a lot more opposed to mandatory versus voluntary restrictions. So I would, I would look at some of that. I would definitely get input from your members, and I would definitely think out of the box on this thing. Try to determine, okay, so, you keep in the same group. Everybody wears their mask, and you have to kind of be checked out a little bit. Maybe if somebody's had the vaccine, maybe there's a difference there. Maybe you're allowed to, maybe they can join a group or something like that, another group. But I would look at that. I'd get input from your members to see what the members want to do, and as well. But and maybe it means moving some. Maybe it means moving some of the game room or the tables someplace else. Maybe you need to relocate them, or put them someplace where they're in a bigger room. Maybe they could be.
Well, yeah, we actually have a separate room that they could use, but we're not renting them out, so we're not using them for exclusive use right now, because the Broward rules on renting out facilities is really restrictive, because it's kind of a one size fits all, and it's almost like for people who are doing a party where they're catering or something. So we haven't put them, told them you have to play in this other space. I don't know.
I think you've got the ability to do that, though.
Also in Broward, if it's open, the community room or the fitness center, and you're probably doing this if it's open, but they have to be thoroughly deep cleaned and sanitized daily on top of the restrictions. So
yeah, we are doing that.
Okay. I mean, to me, again, I would be pretty restrictive. I mean, I would 100% enforce that well, because you have to. I would have that mask thing enforced. I would keep those tables spread out if it's open. Put up signs, about distancing, mask wearing, just as I said before.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this is very helpful. At least, I know what's kind of in the realm of possibility, and we'll see where we go from here. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks for the call.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
I mean, I have many clients that still have their stuff closed.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with that.
Well, let's get our next caller. Carol, you want go ahead, Carol.
Hi.
Thanks for waiting. We appreciate it.
Hi,
In
Carol.
an effort to save money, can the president of the board use his wife, who is a licensed cam manager, to be part-time cam manager pro bono, no money?
I don't know. No family member, really can be providing, can be a service provider. That's a service
For free,
provider.
though.
And I have an issue with that, even if they're not getting paid.
Hey, Carol, can you turn your radio down just a little bit or off?
Turned it off.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
turned it off.
Let me just say on that it's if you're a self-managed association, all right.
We're not, and we're trying to. It's an old condo. It's we're being hit with a lot of special assessments. So we're looking at the $20,000 that they pay the CAM manager and said, you know what, we could do 3/4 of his job for free by a licensed CAM manager just to cut the expenses, because we have a lot of seniors. I mean, it's absolutely free, no fee. That's what we were looking at.
Well, and that's what I was getting at, is that I think in that situation, what you're doing is you're saying you're going to be self-managed for a large portion of your activity.
Right.
And that's, I mean, I don't see a problem with that. Whether the person was a licensed CAM or not, if you're self-managed, you don't have to be a licensed CAM. If you're paying them, then they have to be a licensed CAM. But if this is a person who's volunteering and is in the community, obviously, because it's the president's wife, in the community, and they're volunteering to help with the management, I don't see a problem with that. I don't think there's any issues there, and because you're not paying them. You can't, if you're going to step into that where you're going to pay people, then that's a different story. And
but can we use them? In other words, they still want to keep the management company for some big issues. They're handling a lot of special assessments, but like to do part of the job.
Well, it's up to the property management company as well. They may not. Go ahead, Peter.
The only problem I have with this is under the Condominium Act, and you can get into what is employee or contract if they're not getting paid, but it says basically an association may not employ or contract with any service provider that is owned or operated by a board member, or with any person who has a financial relationship with a board member or officer, or a relative within a third degree of consanguinity by blood or marriage of a board member or officer.
Right.
So, and I just have issues with using a family member as a service provider for an association who's a family member of a board member or an officer. I do not recommend it. I do not think it's something an association should do.
Yeah, I think though that from a practical standpoint, if this person is a member of your community and they're volunteering to assist, we're not asking that, we're not hiring them as a property manager. We're not entering into a contract with them as property manager. We have no contractual or employee relationship with them. All they're doing is at the designation of the board, volunteering to provide time to do what a property manager would normally do. They happen to have the license, which and that's the same thing we have with other boards. We have boards where we have other associations where somebody has a CAM license and they're on the board, and so then they provide, and so they're self-managed, but the person's is not prohibited, or she's not prohibited from doing that just because they have a license. They can volunteer just like any other person. You just have to watch what Peter's talking about, that it doesn't move into a contractual relationship, that they're not given the put under some provision in terms of what they're going to work and how they're going to work, that requires them expending funds that would require some sort of a contract, or reimbursement, and that kind of thing. You just got to you make sure they're not doing that. But I mean, it would be, to me, if you have somebody in your community and you're self-managed, you have somebody in your community that has some experience, certainly it behooves you to use that experience. Just like if a lot of times people have got a bookkeeper, they use a bookkeeper, or whatever, a secretary, they use a secretary. So I think it's where you get into problems is these little games that people play when they get down the road and they say, well, gee, they're really doing all this work and they should get something. Maybe we should give them their dues for free, or maybe we should do this. Well, you can't do that kind of stuff. So, that's a problem. And you have to watch still from an internal control standpoint. You have to watch what kind of authority that person has versus the husband who's on the board and is president. So you got to still make sure that even if the person could do an activity, that you don't allow them to do an activity if it could lead to a change in your internal controls of your organization and how you're and increase the risk. So those are the kind of things you'd have to look at. It makes it a little bit more difficult, but certainly I think that if you've got somebody who knows, who can help out, and you're choosing to, I would rather have that situation than the situation where you got somebody that doesn't know anything about property management, anything about the rules, and has never done that, and now they're trying to self-manage. That's usually a disaster.
Yeah, we don't want to self-manage. But this brings up another question. Who has the last say? A CAM manager or board members? Or if the board votes on something and the CAM manager says no, actually, right now it's a matter of repair. We have no money and they want to do some cosmetic. The board says, no, we need the money for other things. Who has the last say?
The board runs the corporation.
Right.
Okay. The board has the last say. The manager or the management company is an agent for the association. They assist the association. They assist the board, but the board is the decision maker.
Now, here's where it gets a little bit. The problem is that the property manager, as a licensed CAM, has the responsibility to manage that property according to the law. They can't just do. So if you've got a situation, say, for example, where your building is starting to become a problem, it's collapsing, it's a hazard.
Right, it is. We have an old building.
Yeah. So when that happens, you as a board have a legal responsibility to maintain and preserve that building. So you can't just say, well, we're going to ignore it right now and we're going to move on. And so if your property manager may be telling you, this is a situation you have to address. We can't allow a balcony to be falling off, for example, or
we're talking cosmetic. We're just talking the inside of an elevator.
But Mark,
it gets dense.
The CAM manager can tell the board, look, I think you're making a poor choice here. Okay. And the CAM manager can put it in writing to protect himself or herself. But at the end of the day, if
it's the board
makes a poor decision, it's on the board.
Right. Now, but what I was getting at is that your property manager at that point, if they feel like you're not doing what's supposed to be done legally, they may choose to resign and not manage the property. And then property managers are put in that situation a lot. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand. They'll get mad at a property manager because the property manager isn't doing what they want them to do. It's because they're doing what the board is telling them to do. As Peter said, they work for the board, not for an individual unit owner, not for the board hires them. And on behalf of the association, the board hires them. They have to do what the board tells them to do. They can't go out and do other things like you're talking about, Carol. They can't go out and just say, well, we're going to go do this. Even they can't. Their job is to do what the board says. So if a member comes to them and says, look, you got to fix this. You got to get this done. This is a problem. This has got to be done. This is not just cosmetic and, all this kind of thing. Well, they've got to do what the board tells them to do, not what they think they should do, not what the member says that they should do. They have to do what the board says that they should do. So that's very tough. And the only alternative that a property manager has at that point, if they believe that the board is violating the law and they've brought that to their attention and the board continues to do that, then the property manager may be forced into a situation where they need to resign because they can't, under their licensing, they can't further that. They can't assist the board in breaking the law.
I understand. So I understand that. This was just beauty. It's just a beauty thing. And we have no money for beauty.
Well, but that's the other thing too, is that some of these things, and I don't know if you've got any kind of reserve study done, but you need to do some of those kind of things because the board does have the responsibility to make sure that beauty stays there. I really believe that an association has the responsibility to maintain that association at the same level as when the unit owner bought in. That's your job, is to make sure I don't lose value because, we're going to be chintzy on cleaning the place up or painting or doing whatever because we don't have the money. That's not fair to the person that bought their unit, paid a lot of money for their unit, and expects to have everything work, and be nice. And we see that all the time. I know Peter probably same thing. We see it all the time, and you're going to see it way more of it now because people are coming into the communities now and they're buying units that used to cost $140,000 and now they're $300,000. All right. Well, your expectations when you're buying a $300,000 home is completely different than when you bought a $125,000 home. And so those people that are coming in are going to expect a level of service that's higher than what maybe many of these associations were used to. And we see that struggle all the time. And it's really a problem for existing members because they haven't been providing for reserves usually, and usually don't provide for significant reserves. And then what ends up happening is, you're talking about special assessments and all of that. And you get the property owners that have paid big money, they want the roads to be nice and they want everything to be looking good and painted nice and everything else. So it's kind of a difficult situation there. And I would encourage all associations. This isn't just for you, Carol, but for everybody. You need to start taking a look and having a reserve study done at least every 5 years or so, updated at least every few years after that, so that you can take a look and see what you really need to do and when you're going to need to do it, and start putting some money aside for this, because at some point, as these new members come in, they're going to want those services, and they're going to expect the association to do it, and then they're going to be looking at special assessments, and that's devastating to somebody who's been in the community a long time, is on a fixed income, and can't afford that.
A question about that reserve.
Yes.
The board had a vote. They said we're voting on whether we're only going to put half the funding for reserves or no funding. Two choices. When everybody thought, well, let's put the whole thing away because our building is 50 years old and we need repairs.
Right.
Is that allowed to only have two choices in an old building?
Was it a condo association?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, they voted on it, but they never gave the choice of the 100% funding that we did before.
Well, they have to give. They have to give the 100% funding. They have to give the 100% funding. That's what the board has to propose. The members, not the board, but the members can choose to waive that 100% funding and fund at a lower level.
Right, but they never gave them the choice of 100%. They said, here's your choice for vote. Half or none.
Half or none?
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
see, they can't do that.
No, the choice truly was half or full. That would have been the choice.
No,
because
it's half or none.
Yeah,
well, that's not really a proper
choice,
right. Because the way it works is Mark is right. Basically, they don't have to give the association any choice. They can just fully fund and not have the owners vote to reduce fund or to waive.
Right, that's what they normally do.
But the way the law works is that the association must fully fund unless the membership votes to either not fund at all or to fund at some reduced amount. In this case, half, third,
right.
whatever. So there really is not a choice of. There's not a choice of
the vote. We were surprised. That was the vote. You can have half or none.
Well,
and like a lot of people said, well, why not full?
Well, and that's not. And see, again, the board doesn't have the authority to reduce the funding. The members have the authority. So the board has to offer at least full funding. And then it's the members' opportunity to reduce that. Now, the board at that point could say, look, if you choose not to fully fund, here's what we think you should do. And here's what the budget would look like. Or, here's what we think you should do. They have the right to make a suggestion if the members decide not to fully fund.
And actually what that choice really was, if you read between the lines, that choice really was a choice between half, none, or full. Okay? Because if neither the half or the none got the requisite vote, they would have had to fund full.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
They didn't know that.
People were very was half, none, or full.
Yeah, they were startled because they know we need a lot of money now, and we're wondering why they even thought about half funding.
Yeah, and I guess I agree with technically what Peter said is correct. The way they structured that, though, where they gave you only the two choices and you had to vote for, in other words, they weren't giving you a choice, don't vote at all, and then we're doing full funding.
Yeah, that could have been challenged.
Yeah.
The way that vote is worded,
Yes.
that could have been challenged.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
It was a different board. We're a new board now.
yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, and I think that should be revisited, because again, you're going down a path, an old building, no reserves or no fully funded reserves. And here, and like I said, as much as I know it's painful to some people in the community, I can guarantee you it will be much more painful if they're looking at $1,000 or a $1,500 or a $2,000 special assessment. If you're on a fixed income and a board does that to you, and the members they back you into a hole by not doing this because a few board members can't afford the dues going up and they don't want their dues going up. So, and maybe they've got the money that they can handle a special assessment. Well, I've been in the room where that grown man was crying because at 85 years of age, he was going to have to move out of a community he's been in for 20 years because they didn't fund for reserves, and he no longer can afford to live in his home. I don't want to ever be in that room again. And I think if you ever, as a board member or as a member of a community, if you find yourself in that situation, I don't think you'll ever want it to happen again. And that's what happens when people don't fund reserves. They think they're helping people out because they think people are on fixed income and they can't afford it. And all they're doing is creating an environment where eventually that person down the road is going to have to move. And that's not right. And that's not fair. And it's very, very painful for the person involved and for the boards. So I would just caution associations not to go down that path. Find out what you need to reserve and start reserving it so that when the time comes and you got to put new roofs on, they're paid for and you don't have to do a special assessment. And then the person that's is able to take just a little. You can make adjustments for a little. You can't make adjustments for big special assessments. If you're on a fixed income, you're done. There's nothing you can do.
I know, and that's what we have a lot of seniors. That's why the hiring, cutting half the expenses for the CAM manager looks like a great idea because he only comes once a week. Mm-hmm. The CAM manager lives here. He could do that part. We were just looking to save, at least $10,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was the only thought on that one. For free.
Yeah. No, it makes, I know, I understand what you're looking at. But again, I would make sure that, as a result, you're getting things done and you're looking at what needs to be done, especially as it relates to reserves and building maintenance.
Yeah, that's another issue with that. Okay. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks for the call.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, John, are you still there? Oh, okay. We had another one backed up there. I wanted to make sure. Okay. So, Peter, that pretty interesting this morning. I know you were going to follow up, I think, originally on Barbara's situation, but what? Yeah,
the whole thing with reserves, though. Boards need to realize that they can just fully fund. They don't have to go to the membership and ask that it be waived or that it be funded at some reduced percentage. And many associations just quite frankly fully fund their reserves, don't give the owners the choice to lower it or to waive it, and that's fine. Others, and you're right, it really is a case by case, community by community decision. But you have to realize that, when you do, like you said, when you do waive or you do reduce, those dollars are going to come calling at some point.
Right.
You're going to have to invest for it.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate that you put somebody in that situation. Like I said, I've been there and it's not nice. I mean, if you care about your fellow residents in any of these community living associations, you better care about the people around you. Because, you have to live with them. They're part of your family at this point, really. So I did want to make sure that people understand that we have a lot of this that we've been talking about were condominiums and reserves relative to condominiums. The situation, just to make sure, the situation in HOAs, in homeowners associations or property owners associations that are governed under 720 are not the same as
Yeah,
condos.
very different when it comes to reserves. Very different.
Yes, and in fact, in a number of situations with homeowners associations, you may actually have a different class of reserves. The ones we were talking about with condos are ones that are established by Florida law, and they're what they refer to as statutory reserves, and they're specifically covered by statute. But and those statutory reserves, any waiver or any funding or moving or using of those funds not for the intended purpose requires a vote of the members. It requires the members to do that. And there's also requirements for making sure that you are providing for the members are providing for the reserves for certain things. But in an HOA POA situation, you may have what are called non-statutory reserves. In other words, the reserves weren't established by the developer, weren't established by the members, and so therefore they were originally established by the board. This happens quite a bit. A developer, especially if in an HOA where it's a big project and it's taken a number of years, as they get further down the line, they will start. They're usually paying any kind of deficiency. They're covering the deficiency, and so what they'll do is, recognizing that as the association is getting older and they're getting near the end, they'll encourage the association to start putting some funds aside, but not necessarily funding reserves, but putting funds aside because they're not doing it in accordance with any kind of schedule or reserve schedule or anything else. They're just putting money aside. And so they're not really establishing reserves, but they will set that money up. And then what ends up happening is that money can be changed by the board. It isn't a statutory reserve, and it can be the board can decide where they want to spend it. They can move it around and do other things with it until or unless the members establish statutory reserves. So anyway, I just want to make sure that people understand that is a different situation. There's no required reserves for an HOA. They're just they're and they may not even have to maintain the money there, even though it was set aside for that purpose. And there's no guarantee that there'll be enough money set aside there to cover anything, because they may not have done a reserve study or may not have any information on that. So anyway, just a little bit of a make sure we know what's going on, and we can clarify that for people on the HOA side, because that is a little bit different. So otherwise, getting back, it was funny, Peter, Barbara was talking about, and I guess she is in Broward County. So it's interesting that in Broward County, of course, we do have different restrictions, and that's why it's important for you to know what the rules are of your particular municipality or county, because naturally those things can change. And our recommendation, of course, would change based on that county. We have a caller, Edna. Go ahead.
All right. Our budget was accepted in October by one board. It was based on a 2019 reserve study. The new board came in January, and their campaign promise was to drop the fees by $100. At the February meeting, they said they would drop all of the maintenance fees by $100. However, fees are based on a formula based on a percentage of the square footage, and we have 1 and 2 bedroom units. My question is, how can they do this legally?
Well, I think that what they could do is since they said they would do this, I think that then what they should do is just agree to pay everybody in the community $100, so that they can make because they couldn't legally do it. There's no way to do that. So the fact that they came in actually saying, hey, we're going to break the law and not maintain our association so that we can provide everybody with $100 break. Well, I don't think you can do that. So,
Well, if they think, and I'm not arguing if they think the budget is overfunded,
yeah,
okay, and they can justify that, and they can amend the budget. You can amend the budget by the same process that you adopt the budget, the same meeting notice, the same requirements, same kind of board meeting. Now, they can't just make it up. It has to be based on something. But if they legitimately feel that the budget is over budgeted and they can reduce it, now they can't just reduce it a flat 100 per unit. As you said, your expenses are allocated based on a percentage interest between different units.
right.
So different units can be lowered proportionally dependent upon those units' share of the common expenses. So it's not going to be exactly even. It can be roughly whatever it is.
Right.
But, that's not illegal. Now, if they can't intentionally underfund the budget because they have a fiduciary obligation to fund it based on what are the, estimated costs to operate the community, you can't, unfortunately or fortunately, we aren't the government. We can't just print money. You can't run a deficit like the federal government does.
Right.
But again, I don't know their budget. I don't know where they think there's fat that can be cut. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I have no idea. But if they can legitimately reduce it, they can reduce it if it's legit.
Yeah, I mean they have that opportunity, and we're running out of time, so we'd be glad to address this next week. But they do have the opportunity to, if they can show where they think that there is fat in the budget, they can. But it sounds like you got a bunch of people that got elected by making a promise that they really can't keep.
I wasn't defending them.
Yeah, I know, and that's the problem. And you're on track, Edna. I would make sure that they're not taking it out of reserves and underfunding reserves because you've got cash there. But anyway, we're running out of time here. We appreciate it, Edna. We appreciate your call. We appreciate everybody calling in today. Tell your friends about it and call next week if you've got other questions and you want to follow up. And Edna, if you want to call us next Monday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock, we'd be happy to address your issue further because we're here to help you and the community. And it's every Monday, 9 to 10 o'clock right here on WSQ Digital 1450. We're Martin County's Heritage Station.